Hi, very glad to see you on the channel. Before you start listening to the story, write in the comments whether you like the voice on the video. I used to think Jessica's sharp tongue was just part of her personality. She was always quick-witted, always the one who could turn a simple conversation into a room full of laughter. In the beginning, I admired that about her. It was one of the things that drew me in. But over time, the jokes stopped feeling harmless. The laughter had an edge to it, like a blade pressed against my confidence, slowly cutting away at who I was. It started small. Little comments, easy to brush off. Ryan doesn't really do the whole planning thing. I handle that. She'd say it with a smile, and I'd force a chuckle, knowing that if I pushed back, I'd be the one ruining the mood. Or at dinner parties, when the conversation turned to work, and she'd introduce me with a dismissive wave of her hand. He's a personal trainer. Spends his days lifting weights and getting paid to count to 10. It always got a laugh. I smiled along with them, but inside it burned. The worst part? I started believing her, that I wasn't enough, that my work, my life, was just a hobby in comparison to hers. Jessica, the pharmaceutical rep, the corporate success, the one with a real career. And me? I was just the husband who went to the gym and helped people squat properly. I let it slide for years, convincing myself that this was just our dynamic, that maybe this was how love worked. But love isn't supposed to make you feel small. Then came a moment I couldn't ignore. Jessica's family had invited us over for a gathering. Her parents, her brother, a few close friends. The usual crowd. I never liked these events, but I went because not going would only lead to Jessica making snide comments for weeks. I stood by the grill, beer in hand, half listening to her father drone on about his latest investment property. Jessica was near the patio table, laughing with her mother and a few of her friends. Then, her voice cut through the noise. Honestly, Ryan is lucky he married me. Can you imagine him trying to function on his own? I froze. The group burst into laughter. One of her friends, a woman who had always given me condescending smiles, shook her head. Oh, I believe it. He probably still calls you when he can't find something in the fridge. Jessica smirked. Please, if I didn't remind him to pay the bills, he'd probably be living in a tent by now. More laughter. I felt my pulse in my ears. My grip on the beer bottle tightened. I waited for Jessica to turn, to flash me a glance, to at least acknowledge that I was standing right there. But she didn't. She kept going. He actually thinks his gym is a business. I mean, it's adorable, right? Meanwhile, I'm out here negotiating deals with some of the biggest names in the industry. The laughter grew louder. My stomach clenched. I had taken a lot from Jessica over the years. I had swallowed the jokes, the dismissive comments, the way she constantly made herself seem bigger by making me smaller. But this, in front of her family, her friends, acting like I was some clueless child she had to take care of, something inside me snapped. I set my beer down and stepped forward. Jessica. She barely glanced at me, still mid-laugh. What? I spoke calmly, but my voice cut through the air like a knife. That's enough. The laughter died instantly. Everyone turned to look at me. Jessica blinked, like she was only now realizing I had been standing there the whole time. Ryan, she said, her tone shifting. It was just a joke. I nodded slowly. Right. A joke. Like all the others. Her mother shifted uncomfortably. Her father cleared his throat. Jessica's smile faltered, but she recovered quickly, straightening her shoulders. Oh, come on. You know I don't mean it. I tilted my head. Doi. Her expression flickered with something I couldn't quite place. For the first time in years, she looked unsure. I exhaled and picked up my beer again. I'm heading home. Jessica's brows furrowed. Ryan, don't be dramatic. I let out a humorless laugh. You can come home whenever you're done taking care of me. With that, I turned and walked out. I didn't rush. I didn't slam the gate. I just left. The drive home was quiet. No music, no distractions. Just me and my thoughts. I had spent so long convincing myself that Jessica's words didn't matter, that they didn't hurt. But they did. They had chipped away at me piece by piece until I barely recognized the man I used to be. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let her make me feel small anymore. Jessica came home late that night. I was sitting in the living room, The glow from the TV casting long shadows across the walls, but I wasn't watching. The show was just background noise, something to fill the silence. My thoughts have been racing ever since I walked out of that barbecue. Ever since I saw the way Jessica laughed at my expense without a second thought. The door swung open, and she stepped inside, dropping her purse onto the counter with a loud thud. She sighed like she was the one who had been humiliated. Really, Ryan? I didn't answer right away. I let her fume in the silence, let her stew in the discomfort she wasn't used to feeling. Finally, I looked at her. Really what? She rolled her eyes. You embarrassed me in front of my family. A humorless chuckle escaped me. That's funny. I was about to say the same thing to you. Jessica scoffed, crossing her arms. Oh, come on. You know I was joking. You're always so damn sensitive. There it was. That same dismissive tone. The same way she always deflected any responsibility. Before, I would have backed down. I would have let her twist it, let her make me feel like I was the problem. But I wasn't doing that anymore. I stood up slowly, turning to face her. You know what, Jessica? I'm tired of hearing that. Every single time you put me down, it's just a joke. Every time you humiliate me in front of people, I'm too sensitive. Do you ever stop to think that maybe, just maybe, the problem isn't me? She blinked, caught off guard for a second, but recovered quickly. Oh, so now I'm the villain? Because I tease you a little? It's not teasing, I said, my voice calm but firm. Teasing is playful. This is different. This is you making sure everyone knows that you think you're better than me. Jessica scoffed again, shaking her head. That's ridiculous. Is it? I took a step closer. Because if the roles were reversed, if I spent every family gathering making you the punchline, making jokes about how you wouldn't survive without me, how you're just lucky I put up with you, you'd lose your mind. She hesitated. I saw it in the way her jaw tensed, in the flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. I let the moment stretch between us before shaking my head. You don't respect me, Jessica. You never have. She let out a sharp breath. Oh my God, Ryan. You're blowing this way out of proportion. No, I said simply. I'm finally seeing things clearly. I walked past her, heading upstairs without another word. She didn't follow. Over the next few days, something shifted. Jessica didn't apologize, she never did. But she also didn't speak to me much. It wasn't the silent treatment exactly. More like a Cold War. We existed in the same house, but we barely spoke beyond the bare minimum. I should have been upset, should have been eager to fix things. But instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Then, a week later, Jessica dropped the bomb. I was in the kitchen making coffee when she walked in, her expression unreadable. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, studying me. I'm going to Chicago next month, she said. Ich glänzte her. For work? Her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Sort of. I set my mug down slowly. What does that mean? She inhaled deeply, like she was steeling herself. Then she shrugged. I don't want to lie to you, so I'll just be honest. I'm meeting someone. The words didn't register at first. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, for her to say something else. But she didn't. I swallowed, my voice steady. Meeting someone? Her expression didn't change. Yeah, someone I met online. I've been thinking a lot about what I want, and I think I need to explore my options. A dull ringing filled my ears. She said it so casually, like she was discussing a change in her workout routine. So what? I asked, my voice eerily calm. You're telling me you're going on a trip to cheat on me? Jessica exhaled, tilting her head. Don't be so dramatic. I'm being honest with you. I could have lied, could have made up a fake work trip, but I didn't. That should count for something. I allowed a hollow laugh. You want credit for telling me to my face that you're stepping out of our marriage. She sighed, shaking her head like I was the one being unreasonable. Look, you can be mad, or you can be mature about this. I'm giving you a heads up. You'll just have to deal with it. There it was. No guilt, no remorse, just expectation. Jessica had spent years conditioning me to accept whatever treatment she threw my way. She had tested my boundaries over and over, pushing to see how much I would tolerate. And this was the final test. But she didn't realize something. I had changed. I looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. All right. She blinked. All right. Yeah. I took a sip of my coffee, hiding the slow, growing smirk threatening to spread across my face. If that's what you want, go for it. Jessica studied me, narrowing her eyes slightly. She expected a fight, expected me to break down, beg, demand she reconsider. Why didn't it throw her off? She straightened, tossing her hair over her shoulder. Good. I'm glad we're being adults about this. I smiled. Oh, absolutely. She left the kitchen with an air of victory, thinking she had won. She had no idea, because while Jessica was planning her little affair, I was already planning something better. She thought she was about to cheat on her husband. She didn't realize she was about to get catfished by him instead. Jessica thought she had backed me into a corner. She expected me to roll over, to accept her decision like I had accepted everything else she had thrown at me over the years. But this time, I wasn't going to sit quietly while she walked all over me. She had handed me an opportunity on a silver platter, and she had no idea. The moment she walked out of the kitchen, I grabbed my phone and started planning. First, I needed to know exactly what I was working with. Jessica wasn't the type to leave an obvious trail, but she was arrogant. Too arrogant. She had no reason to be careful, because in her mind, she didn't need to be. She had already told me she met this guy online, which meant there was a record of it somewhere. I waited until she went to bed that night, then did what any man in my position would do. I snooped. Jessica's laptop was on the kitchen counter, screen dark, charger plugged in. I clicked the trackpad, and, just as I expected, she hadn't logged out of anything. I navigated to her browser history, scrolling through the mess of work emails and shopping sites until I found what I was looking for. An active profile on a high-end dating site. I clicked it, my pulse steady. Her username was something generic, nothing flashy. The bio was vague, just enough to sound enticing without giving too much away. Successful professional, looking for excitement. No strings. Discretion preferred. No strings. I clenched my jaw, taking a deep breath before scrolling down to her messages. And there he was, Ethan. Their chat history went back weeks. Jessica, can't wait to finally meet you in person. Chicago is going to be unforgettable. Ethan, same. You're everything I've been looking for. I scrolled further, reading how she had carefully laid out the details. Her schedule, the hotel she had booked, the restaurant she wanted to meet at. She had planned this like a business trip, every detail precise and intentional. But the best part? I had everything I needed to replace Ethan before she ever got the chance to meet him. I spent the next hour creating my own profile. I found photos of a model, sharp suit, chiseled jaw, the exact type Jessica would fall for. I used a fake name, matching Ethan's general details, but twisting them just enough to make sure the real guy would never show up. I made the account look authentic, threw in a few messages to other profiles to avoid suspicion, and then the real work began. I had to get Jessica's attention. I waited until the next evening when she was lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She smirked at something on the screen, completely unaware that I was watching. Her phone buzzed, and she unlocked it immediately. Bingo! She had taken the bait. I kept it simple at first, mirroring the way Ethan had spoken to her. Me, I can't stop thinking about next weekend. She replied almost instantly. Jessica, me neither. I've never wanted something this badly. I clenched my jaw, but forced myself to stay detached. This wasn't personal. This was strategy. We messaged for days, building up the anticipation. I made sure to flatter her, to feed into the exact fantasy she wanted, attention, admiration, the feeling of being desired. She ate it up, completely unaware that the man she was falling for wasn't a stranger at all. Then, 2 days before the trip, I made my move. Me, change of plans. Let's meet somewhere more private. I booked us a suite at the Lexington Hotel. Jessica hesitated for a moment before replying. Jessica, you're full of surprises. Me, only the best for you. She agreed without question. She had no idea she was walking in her own downfall. By the time Friday rolled around, everything was in place. I had already called her company's HR department, sending them screenshots of our messages under an anonymous email. I had booked the hotel suite in her name, ensuring there was a record of her checking in. And most importantly, I had arranged for someone to tip off the real Ethan about a scheduling mistake, making sure he would never show up. Jessica had been so confident that she was in control of this. She thought she was the mastermind. She was about to find out just how wrong she was. I watched Jessica pack her suitcase, humming to herself, completely unaware that she was walking straight into a trap. She had planned this trip down to the smallest detail. Her outfits, her excuses, the little sigh she would give when she texted me that she was stuck in back-to-back meetings. She thought she was in control. She thought I was clueless. She zipped up the bag and glanced at me. "I'll be back Sunday night," she said casually, like she wasn't leaving to betray me. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "Safe travels." She hesitated for just a moment. Maybe she expected me to be upset. Maybe she was waiting for me to argue, to beg her to stay. When I didn't, she smiled. A smug, satisfied little smile. Then she walked out the door. The moment she was gone, I grabbed my own bag, the one I had packed days ago. She wasn't the only one flying to Chicago. I arrived hours before her, giving myself time to get everything in place. The Lexington Hotel was every bit as luxurious as she expected it to be. Grand lobby, crystal chandeliers, thick carpets that muffled footsteps. The kind of place that made people feel powerful just by walking through the doors. I checked into the suite under her name, just as I had arranged, then set up the final pieces of my plan. I ordered room service, champagne, fresh strawberries, everything she had mentioned wanting in her messages. Then I waited. By the time Jessica arrived, I was already seated at the restaurant's private lounge, watching the entrance from the dimly lit booth I had chosen. She walked in wearing a sleek black dress, her hair styled in waves like she was about to star in a movie. She scanned the room, looking for the man she thought she was meeting. Her phone buzzed. "Me. I'm in the back corner. Can't wait to finally see you." I watched as she smiled at her screen, tucking her phone into her purse. Then she turned, and her world shattered. Her eyes landed on me. Her entire body froze, like someone had just yanked the air out of her lungs. I raised my glass. Surprise. Jessica's expression went from shock to horror to fury in a matter of seconds. She glanced around, like she was hoping for an escape route. There wasn't one. Slowly, she walked toward the table. Her voice was low, sharp. "What the hell is this?" I took a sip of champagne, savoring the moment. "This," I gestured to the empty seat across from me. "This is your date." Her hands curled into fists at her sides. "You set me up." I smirked. "You set yourself up. I just gave you exactly what you were looking for." Jessica's nostrils flared. "You have no right, no right." I cut her off, leaning forward. "You looked me in the eye and told me you were meeting someone. You thought you could cheat on me, that I would just accept it. Tell me, Jessica, how does it feel to be the one getting played?" Her mouth opened, then closed. No words came out. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. "By the way, I already forwarded everything to your company. Every message, every reservation, every detail about how you plan to spend the weekend exploring your options." Jessica's face drained of color. "You didn't." I smiled. "I did." Her breath hitched. She was panicking now. "Ryan, please." "No, Jessica." My voice was calm, steady. "You made your choice. Now you get to live with it." She turned on her heel and stormed out, her heels clicking against the floor, her entire plan crumbling around her. I watched her go, then finish my drink. Jessica thought she was about to ruin me. Instead, she ruined herself. Jessica stormed out of the restaurant, her heels clicking against the marble floor like gunfire. Heads turned as she pushed past waiters and guests, her face twisted in a mixture of fury and humiliation. She had expected a romantic evening with her fantasy man. Instead, she got me, the husband she thought she had outplayed. I didn't rush after her. I didn't need to. I took my time finishing my drink, letting the moment settle, letting the weight of her downfall press against her shoulders. When I finally stood, I left the untouched second glass of champagne on the table and made my way toward the lobby. I found her outside, near the valet, pacing in short, jerky movements as she furiously tapped on her phone. Her fingers trembled, whether from anger or fear, didn't know. Didn't care. She spotted me and immediately marched over, eyes blazing. "What the hell did you do?" I adjusted my cuff, calm, measured. "You'll have to be more specific." Her nostrils flared. You sent those messages to my company? Are you out of your mind? I tilted my head. Oh, I'm perfectly sane. But you might want to check your email. Jessica hesitated, her phone still clutched in her hand. For a split second, I saw a real fear in her eyes. Then she looked down and swiped at the screen, her breath hitching as she read. I already knew what she was seeing. The forwarded emails, the screenshots, the evidence of her weekend plans. And most importantly, the email from HR requesting a mandatory meeting first thing Monday morning. She looked up, her face pale. You just ruined my career. I shrugged. You ruined it yourself. I just made sure your employers saw who they were really investing in. Her jaw clenched. You had no right. I laughed, shaking my head. That's rich, coming from you. You had no right to make a fool out of me. No right to walk into our home and tell me, to my face, that you were meeting someone else. You acted like I was supposed to just take it. She crossed her arms, shifting tactics. We could have worked through this, Ryan. You didn't have to. I cut her off. Work through what? The part where you openly planned to cheat? Or the part where you expected me to sit back and be okay with it? I took a step closer, lowering my voice. No, Jessica, you don't get to rewrite the story now that you're losing. Her lips parted, but she had no comeback. For the first time in our entire relationship, she had nothing to say. I let the silence stretch between us before shaking my head. Enjoy your last few days at your job, Jessica. I hear the unemployment line is lovely this time of year. She exhaled sharply, eyes shining with unshed tears. But I didn't stay to watch her crumble. I turned and walked away, feeling the weight of years of humiliation, manipulation, and betrayal finally slide off my shoulders. Jessica had spent our entire marriage making me feel small. Now, she was the one left standing alone. Jessica didn't come home that night. I didn't expect her to. There was nothing left for her to say, nothing she could twist in her favor. She had spent years making me question myself, convincing me that I was never enough, that I was somehow lucky to have her. But in the end, she was the one who had been exposed. I slept better that night than I had in years. The next morning, I checked my phone out of habit. No messages from her. No calls. Just silence. I smiled to myself, grabbed my gym bag, and went to work like it was any other day. But Jessica? Her day was about to be very different. By noon, I got a text from Mike, one of my oldest friends and a guy who had never liked Jessica to begin with. Dude, have you seen this? He attached a screenshot, an internal company memo that had already started circulating in private group chats. Effective immediately, Jessica is no longer employed with this company. We do not condone conduct that conflicts with our values of professionalism and integrity. I chuckled, shaking my head. It had happened faster than I expected. But I wasn't surprised. The pharmaceutical industry was ruthless. She had built her career on networking, on carefully curated relationships. The moment those connections saw her as a liability, she was finished. Still, I didn't reach out. I wasn't going to gloat. The silence was better. That evening, I was locking up the gym when I heard the familiar screech of tires outside. A car door slammed. I turned just as Jessica stormed up to me, her hair a mess, her usual poised demeanor replaced with something frantic, unhinged. "What the hell did you do?" she snapped, her voice tight with barely restrained fury. I sighed, unlocking my car door with a slow, deliberate motion. "Jessica, I'm tired. What do you want?" She laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Oh, you're tired? You just ruined my life, Ryan." I leaned against my car, arms crossed. "I ruined your life? Or did you ruin your own life when you decided to cheat and brag about it?" Her eyes flashed with something desperate. "Do you have any idea what I lost today? My job, my career, my reputation. I gave years to that company, and they fired me over some stupid messages." I smirked. "They fired you because you're untrustworthy. Because you were dumb enough to use your company email to plan a romantic getaway with a man who didn't even exist." She swallowed hard, her breathing ragged. "You set me up." "I sure did," I said evenly. "And you fell for it. Easily." Jessica stared at me, her hands trembling. For the first time, I saw real fear behind her anger. She had always been the one in control, always dictating the terms of our relationship. Now, she had nothing. I lost everything, she whispered. Everything. I tilted my head. And whose fault is that? She looked away, blinking rapidly, as if she was trying to keep herself from breaking down. But I wasn't going to comfort her. I wasn't going to tell her it would be okay. Jessica had spent years tearing me down, making me feel like I wasn't worth respect. Now, she was the one drowning, and I wasn't throwing her a life raft. I opened my car door and got in, rolling down the window one last time. You should go, Jessica. Maybe find someone else to take care of you. Because I never will again. Then I drove off, leaving her standing there, alone in the parking lot with nowhere left to turn. Jessica didn't show up at the house that night, and for once, I didn't have to wonder where she was. She had nowhere to go, no job to return to, no reputation to protect. The walls were closing in on her, and there wasn't a single person left to pull her out. I woke up early the next morning, stretched, and felt a strange sensation wash over me. Peace. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up with a weight pressing down on my chest. No tension, no dread of what sarcastic remark or passive-aggressive insult would come my way before I even had my first cup of coffee. Just silence. Beautiful, uninterrupted silence. Then, around noon, the call came. My lawyer's voice was sharp, professional. Jessica has hired an attorney. I exhaled slowly. Of course she has. She's contesting the divorce, he continued. Claims she was tricked into a situation that led to her unemployment and is citing financial hardship. She's asking for spousal support. I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. You've got to be kidding me. Not even a little. Jessica was nothing if not predictable. She had spent our marriage controlling every situation, and now, when she had lost all leverage, she was reaching for the only thing she thought she could still manipulate. Me. I leaned back in my chair, shaking my head. How strong is her case? My lawyer scoffed. She doesn't have one. The evidence of her affair, the messages, her admission to you. She'd be laughed out of court. The fact that she was fired for professional misconduct only makes it worse. No judge in their right mind is going to award her a dime. I smirked. So what's her real goal here? She's stalling, he said. Dragging this out. Hoping to make your life difficult enough that you'll cave and throw her a settlement. Jessica had always been good at playing the long game. She thought I'd get exhausted, that I'd give in just to make her go away. But she had already taken enough from me. I wasn't giving her anything else. Let her drag it out, I said. I've got nothing but time. For the next few weeks, I focused on my work. The gym was thriving, new clients rolling in, old ones coming back after hearing about the expansion plans I was setting in motion. Without Jessica draining my energy, I was sharper, more motivated. Everything I had neglected over the years, the business, my personal goals, even my friendships, I was finally rebuilding. Jessica, on the other hand, was crumbling. Word spread fast. Some of her former colleagues had cut ties completely, not wanting to associate with someone whose career had crashed so publicly. She wasn't just out of job, she was blacklisted. Every potential employer who called her old company for a reference was met with a carefully worded but brutal response. Her name was tainted. Then, one evening, as I was locking up the gym, my phone rang. Jessica. I stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. Curiosity won. I picked up. What? A deep sigh came through the line. Ryan, can we just talk? No, I said flatly. She let out a humorless laugh. Come on, just 5 minutes. I glanced at the time. You've got 2. Silence. Then, I don't have anywhere to go. I let that sit for a moment. It was the first time she had admitted weakness, the first time she had spoken to me without condescension or arrogance. But I didn't care. That's not my problem, I said. Jessica's voice wavered. Ryan, I know I messed up. I tilted my head, leaning against my car. Messed up? You told me to my face that you were going to cheat. You thought I'd just roll over and accept it. She exhaled shakily. I don't know why I did it. I laughed. Oh, duh. Because you thought you could. Because you thought I was weak. You spent years tearing me down so you wouldn't feel guilty about what you were doing behind my back. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, barely above a whisper, she asked, Can we fix this? I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. No, Jessica, I said, my voice calm. We can't. And then I hung up, letting her sit in the silence she had created. Jessica didn't call again after that night. Maybe she finally understood that there was no fixing this, that there was nothing left for her to manipulate, no way to charm or guilt her way back into my life. Or maybe she was just too proud to keep trying once she realized I wasn't going to cave. Either way, I didn't care. I was too busy reclaiming my life. The gym was doing better than ever. Without Jessica constantly belittling my career, I threw myself into expanding the business, pushing it to the next level. I started offering specialized training programs, hired a few more trainers, even upgraded some of the equipment I had been meaning to replace for years, but always put off because Jessica had convinced me it wasn't worth the expense. Now, every decision I made was mine alone. No second guessing, no waiting for permission, and it felt damn good. One afternoon, Mike walked into my office, tossing his gym bag onto the chair across from my desk. I gotta say, man, I don't think I've ever seen you like this. I raised an eyebrow. Like what? He leaned against the desk, smirking, happy, focused. It's like you finally woke up after being on autopilot for years. I exhaled, nodding. Because I did. Mike clapped me on the shoulder. Well, it's about time. That night, after closing up, I sat on my balcony with a beer in hand, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. It had been months since the divorce proceedings started, and for the first time in a long time, I felt weightless. No tension in my shoulders. No pressure squeezing my chest. No wondering if I was enough. Because I knew I was. Then, just when I thought I had put the past completely behind me, I got an unexpected message. Unknown number. I don't expect you to answer, but I wanted to say I'm sorry. I stared at the screen for a moment, then smirked. Jessica. She had finally broken her silence. I thought about ignoring it, about deleting the message like I had the last ones. But something made me pause. I typed back 2 words. For what? A few minutes passed. Then, Jessica, for everything. For the way I treated you. For the way I made you feel. You didn't deserve that. I took a sip of my beer, letting her words sit there. Years ago, I would have killed to hear her say those things. I would have held on to that apology, like it meant something, like it could undo everything she had done. But now it felt empty. Too little, too late. I know I didn't. A pause. Then, Jessica, I've lost everything, Ryan. My job, my reputation. Even my family barely speaks to me. I don't know who I am anymore. I exhaled slowly. This was the part where the old me would have felt bad, where I would have softened and let her back in, even if just for a conversation. But I wasn't that man anymore. Sounds like a you problem. I didn't wait for a response. I deleted the chat, turned off my phone, and leaned back in my chair. Jessica had spent years making me feel like I wasn't enough, like I was disposable. Now, she was the one left behind, and I had never felt more free. Months passed, and with each one, Jessica became less and less relevant to my life. At first, I still heard things, whispers from mutual acquaintances, the occasional social media post that made its way to me. She had moved into a small apartment on the other side of town, downgraded to a used car, and was still struggling to find steady work. No one in her old industry wanted to touch her after what happened. The woman who once held herself above everyone, who made me feel like I was lucky to have her, was now just another name in a long list of people who had fallen from grace. And me? I was thriving. The gym had expanded, doubling in size. I had a growing team of trainers under me, a steady stream of high-profile clients, and a business that was more successful than I had ever imagined. Without Jessica's constant negativity weighing me down, I had thrown myself into my work, into building something that was mine alone. One afternoon, as I was wrapping up a session, Mike walked in, shaking his head with a smirk. You are not going to believe who I ran into today. I already had a feeling. Jessica. Yep. He sat down on a bench, stretching his arms. Man, she looked rough. I don't think I've ever seen her like that. No makeup,